Okay, we've got the whole of the 3W stand to ourselves, but our cameraman Tom has decided to squash myself, Michael Atherton and Nasser Hussain together like sardines. Anyway, we're going to preview two massive games in the ICC Men's T20 World Cup that happen this weekend. One will be here in Bridgetown, which is of course England against Australia, and the other of course is the massive one between Pakistan and India. We're going to start though, Nas, with Pakistan and what happened yesterday. That was extraordinary. What scenes from the USA?
It was, and it is a huge upset, arguably one of the biggest upsets in World Cup cricket. You know, USA, an associate nation, working their way up through the rankings, trying to find a way. I mean, that ground that they played on was literally a baseball field a few years ago, converted to a cricket field. I did Pakistan's last game in England at the Oval, and I did USA's first game of the tournament in Dallas against Canada. And I can tell you, when I left the ground in Dallas, I thought to myself, Pakistan better be careful here. Because the way they played at the Oval and the way they played in England, they batted poorly, bowled poorly, and fielded poorly. And USA were the complete opposite of that. I don't think some upsets happen because you just get over the line, people mess up the last 3 or 4 overs. I think 80% of that game, USA bossed the game and deserved to win. They looked the better side.
They also made some slightly strange decisions. Fakhar Zaman coming out for that super over, you would have put him up against the left arm seamer straight away, wouldn't you? And they didn't.
Yeah, they looked as though they panicked a little bit, didn't they? Mohammad Amir then bowling, after bowling a very good over towards the end of the game, then bowling wides in his over. So it was a poor performance. I mean, Pakistan often start that way, don't they? It has become a complete cliche to talk about their highs and lows, but they are a side that do scale the rooftops and then plumb the depths more than most. And you certainly wouldn't put it past them to completely turn around things in the next game in New York against India, but they're going to have to play a whole lot better than they did in that first game and against England when they looked at. I missed the last 2 games because I'd flown to Ghana to do some filming, but on the first of those games they didn't look like a side on that evidence that you would put as one of the top 3 or 4 challengers in this tournament, and so far they're living up to that.
Can they change it around? I mean, what can they do? I mean, there's a lot of talk on social media about Azim Khan because of his weight and the fact that he's not scoring any runs and he's dropping catches, so they go back to Rizwan and all that sort of stuff, but have they got the core that could actually do something here?
Well, you know, it's a very Pakistan thing to do, really. They do change management, they change coaches, they change captains. They went from Shaheen Shah Afridi to Babar Azam. You know, Gary Kirsten suddenly becomes coach. They had an opening combination before in Rizwan and Babar. They changed that for about 6 months, and then the game before the World Cup at the Oval, they go back to Babar and Rizwan, and that's what they start here. They change keepers. So it is part of how they have played their game. We have Owen Morgan working with us, obviously. And Morgs, leading up to a World Cup, 50-over World Cup, he was very critical of England for exactly that reason. He wants clarity of thought. And that's the only thing I would now try and give if I was in that dressing room or in around the Pakistan camp, is some clarity in thought of who are the openers, who's keeping wicket, who's taking the new ball. If there is another super over, who's bowling that super over? Who's batting in that super over? Why isn't Fakhar Zaman on strike, our best 6-hitter in the game? So just a bit more clarity of thought. And they need to start well. With bat, if it is Rizwan and Babar, they need to start well. And with the ball, I was there in Dubai when they beat India in Dubai. One of their famous wins in T20 cricket in the World Cup out there was Shaheen Shah Afridi. That first couple of overs when he got Rohit and he got KL Rahul, that sets the tone. If they are going to be very Pakistan-like and lose one day and win the next, they have to start well to get some momentum back into their competition.
The one thing in their favour, or potentially a kind of spanner in the works, is nobody knows what this pitch in New York is going to do. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the surfaces there, which were, the trays were shipped in from Adelaide, grasses and stuff were grown in Florida. It's a very hard ask for the groundsmen and ground staff to get those pitches absolutely right in such a short period of time. But the ICC issued a press release the other day saying, you know, we've got some concerns. They're not up to speed or up to scratch, or not playing as well as we'd like them to play. Now, T20, of course, narrows the field anyway, and then if you're playing on a pitch that you have no idea what it's going to do and may indeed be very up and down, you know, Pakistan do have pace bowlers that could exploit that and cause problems. So I think that is one area that's a little bit in their favour. The unknown quantity of the New York Stadium and the New York pitch, and of course the broader aspect of this game is that this is the big showpiece event. I mean, in terms of cricket in America and growing it, the best thing that's happened so far is the success of the USA team, without a question. But you'd have to say that they've got some issues around logistics around the New York event. So fingers crossed that the pitch plays half decently and we get a good event and a good crowd in for the big showpiece event.
Nas mentioned Rohit Sharma opening with KL Rahul before. It's now Virat Kohli. It was the other day. How do you see that and the way India line up with the bat?
Well, my own view is that that's the right move to get Kohli up the order with Rohit Sharma, who took a blow the other day, of course, and one assumes will be fit, and that will be the opening combination. And they look very well set up, don't they? They've gone with their experience, a little bit like we've talked about Australia in a moment. They've kept faith with David Warner and their experienced players. India have done exactly the same, and I think that's the right way to go.
And what about them with the ball? I mean, obviously Bumrah leads the way. Do Pakistan perhaps have those pace bowlers to slightly outdo them if the pitch is a little bit up and down?
Yeah, I mean, India selected for the World Cup, they brought the extra spinner as well, and I think Ravi Shastri was fairly critical as they went on air in New York, saying now if you reselected the side, seen those pitches in New York, you may want the extra seamer. But what they did, they were quite brave. They left out Kuldeep Yadav, who is they're absolutely the most improved, their star white ball bowler, with the exception of Bumrah, the spin option, the wrist spin option, and they played the extra seamer. I think the big thing for them is Hardik Pandya. Hardik Pandya has had a really difficult year, 2 years, A, with injury, B, then obviously what happened in the IPL and the move back to the Mumbai Indians to captain, that didn't go well. So he was under a lot of pressure, but he started the tournament well. And if Hardik Pandya can play that all-rounder role like he has done over the years with bat, ball and in the field, and obviously some leadership as well with Rohit there, then that balance of that side, they can play the extra seamer, they can still have the long batting lineup. So Pandya was a big tick for him the other day.
Okay, well that's the big game in New York. All eyes will be on that game and indeed the pitch, try and put on a showpiece event. Massive game here tomorrow between England and Australia, not least because England of course had that rain out against Scotland. Australia have practiced already. England are over doing a little coaching clinic with some of the young kids, which is great to see. I mean, this is obviously a significant game. It's England-Australia, but in the context of what happened here the other day with the rain out, has it made it more so?
I think so for England. If it didn't go well on Saturday against Australia, it just leaves them with no wriggle room then. If you have a washout or bad performance, you are really struggling. So I think it's just ramped up the pressure a little bit on England. But of course, an occasion like England-Australia, there's always that in any case, that these sets of players are well used to playing against each other and well used to the pressure that comes with that. Australia going for a 3-timer, and that's a measure of the kind of experience and success that they've had over the last few years. The reigning World Test champions, reigning 50-over champions, and of course trying to become the first team that will hold all three at the same time. And they've got a hard nucleus of players that have been involved in that success across formats. So it should be a cracking game.
You were doing the game last night. It was on a pitch on that side of the square. It's now been moved to completely the other side of the square. Given what we've seen and the sample we've had from the game so far, does it lend itself to a taller bowler and therefore potentially Reece Topley coming in somehow? I
think there is potential for that. I was watching Mitchell Starc, who swung it big, yeah, and he obviously went off with cramp the other day, but listening to the captain, he's fit, I think, and Cummins will come back in for Nathan Ellis. But there's a beautiful breeze here. We saw Trumpelman get wickets, we saw Curry get wickets the other night for Scotland, so it's perfectly set up for a left armour from this end. So that brings Topley into the equation, especially as well because Warner and Head are at the top of the order, two left-handers. Topley has a good record against left-handers, and these pitches during the day have been very dry, so you've got that combination of the swing, which is dangerous up top, but then if you can bowl your cutters, then you come into the game towards the end of the innings as well.
What would you do with England's team selection?
I would play Topley, definitely.
For whom? Can't play 12. Can't play 12.
Sneak 12 in on the list, but I would probably go for Jordan and back my batters. The reason they're playing Jordan is because they won Jordan at 8. That means, and Jordan's batting over the last year or two has been excellent, and obviously his fielding and his bowling and his death bowling. but you could play. They want all their top 7 to go hard, knowing that they've got Jordan at 8 and batting depth. So it could be Wood, but the breeze is perfect for Topley bowling this end. And also then you can have Archer come from the other end, or Wood. It's a perfect breeze, tall bowler, 2 left-handers. I would definitely play Topley.
It's a fresh pitch. I chatted with the groundsman, and as you rightly said, it's at the other end of the square from last night. So I think the strategy in the game will be quite interesting, because as you know, the breeze comes from the east. So they'll be hitting to a much shorter boundary to the leg side, and that is with the wind. So you'll see all the bowlers trying to, get the batters to hit to the longer side into the breeze. So it might be strategically quite an interesting game to watch.
You did Australia's game the other day. What did you see there? I mean, Stoinis obviously got them up and going towards the end of that game, but David Warner was the glue.
He was, and it was. It's not a bad pitch to play Australia on, because obviously they're well travelled and they play in all parts of the world now. But if you ask an Australian what sort of pitch would you like, it would be a quick, bouncy pitch. You think of Mitch Marsh growing up at the Wacker. What's his favourite shot? The pull shot, off a length, rock back, pull it for 6 or 4. This pitch is a little bit uneven, a little bit too pace, and you can see in the first 14 overs of that game against Oman, they weren't quite so sure. Warner played well, but even Warner wasn't going, a strike rate of 200. It was hard work. And in the end, it actually took Stoinis in the 15th over to absolutely muscle 26 of the over. So it's a combination of nous, which Warner showed. Warner has played, I think he's played a CPL out here. He's played a lot of cricket in India. And you remember Indian pitches historically have been a bit like this. They do turn a little bit and a bit slower. The recent IPLs haven't been like that. But Warner showed all that experience of what is a good score. I'll hang in here. And then we've got the likes of Stoinis, Mitch Marsh if he survives towards the end, Tim David, those big hitters who can muscle boundaries at the end, use the wind, as Ath mentioned there. So I thought they were pretty smart. They looked pretty good with the ball. Mitch Stark swung it nicely, as he often does with that new ball. And Stoinis bowled a lot of cross-seam deliveries. Having batted on it, he realised the uneven bounce, and he bowled a lot of cross-seam deliveries, and a couple did keep low, and a couple zipped through. He ended up with 3 for as well. And Zampa, very skillful. His stats of late haven't been as good as before, but Zampa's a very useful operator in these conditions.
Just one final one then. I mean, we had that high drama yesterday with USA beating Pakistan, so that would have had a lot of eyeballs on it. Does ICC need these 2 big games to be something of a showpiece?
Yeah, I think it was always going to be a little bit of a slow burner of a World Cup, wasn't it? Because you've got this lengthy initial stage before you get into the Super 8s, where you'd expect every game to be very competitive. But we have seen some good cricket, especially from some of the associate nations, and that was a wonderful effort from America yesterday. But I think this is a big weekend, England, Australia, at a showpiece ground, showpiece event, and then obviously the game that they've really almost set this World Cup around. They've put so much money and effort into getting this pop-up stadium in New York, or just outside of New York, ready for an India-Pakistan game. Obviously, the only time we see India and Pakistan play is in ICC events. So I think they've kind of set this weekend up as the weekend to almost ignite the competition, and they're 2 games that could well do that.
Well, let's see if this competition does get ignited over this weekend.